Hello everyone, my name is Paul, I'm from ZiCorp Studios in England. Now you may or may not know that we are currently working on a browser-based space simulation statistical combat game. I'm not going to go into too much details about the game because it's still work in progress and we are still in the process of designing the raw parts of the game. However, we do expect alpha to start within the next 2 months. Now, I'm just going to talk a little bit today about our combat system. This is something that I've just calculated over the past week or so. What we've basically tried to do is to go for an extremely simple way of calculating combat. Now, obviously, for the general user, you won't really need to know too much about the combat system behind it, and I'm not going to give everything away because there's going to be plenty of stat hunters out there who will want to work all this out for themselves. So, essentially, there are various variables attached to what we call a unit. Now, a unit would be either a space flight vehicle or a ground troop. As you may or may not know, with this game, we have both ground-based combat and space-based combat. And in order to get beyond the space-based combat and to get to the ground-based, to be able to capture resources, i.e., money, you need to defeat the space opposition first in order to penetrate the planet, get down to the bases, and destroy them, and so on and so forth. So, every single unit has a certain amount of statistics. In this instance, I'll go over the 3 stages of combat. Well, actually, there's 4 because I missed out the one important part. First of all, the target engagement stage. Basically, each round lasts 5 ticks on the server, although we've not fully calculated how long each tick should last. The reason we're using ticks is because this allows the server to calculate things efficiently and well, and we can monitor and track everything rather than doing everything in one big go. Now, each unit is given a unit score. Now, that unit score would represent quite basically how powerful the unit is, or what ranking we give that unit. For instance, I have a unit score of 5 on a particular fighter unit that we're using. Now, the unit score will try and target in that round, which lasts 5 ticks, so that's 5 turns, 5 turns being each side gets to fire upon each other. It will try and target someone of its own unit score. If it fails to do that, for instance, there is no other units opposing that, it then takes the closest unit score to itself, favouring the lowest. For instance, my unit score is 5, and I am facing units with scores of 1, 2, 3, 6, 7 and 9. Now, it tries to look for a unit score of 4, but there is none of that unit score present, so instead it's going to go for the number 6. However, if the opposition was 1, 2, 4, 6, 7 and 9, it would go for number 4, quite simply. Now, the reason we've done this, and this also re-randomizes, so the end of the round, it then re-chooses. Basically, if you have, say, 6 units, all of a unit score of 4, it will randomly target one of those particular units within that unit score band. This way it's possible to have your own units targeting multiple or even individual ones. It's all randomized. Unfortunately, we're not going to be coding in any AI because it's completely pointless and generally a waste of our time in order to get a very enjoyable and statistical game. Once target engagement has been completed, however, you then get to the firing stage. As I say, per tick there is a firing stage for each side, and there are 5 ticks in a round before the units reallocate their targets. We have 2 statistics for the first stage of allocating the target, shooting the target, and basically seeing if you're actually able to hit. You have an accuracy and you have a swiftness value. The accuracy value will go against the swiftness value. For instance, if you have a higher accuracy than the opposition's unit's swiftness, you have more of a chance of hitting them, basically. Now, there's also a randomization in this. We use the accuracy, we use a swiftness, and then we use a random seed that we put in. That will then determine whether you have successfully hit the target. This is before armor penetration, if I've made a fuck up before on the video. So, and by the way, I do apologise if I'm talking a bit crap because it's getting really late and I've been trying to work on this all night. So, okay, if you manage to successfully, accurately hit the target, you then need to see if your weapon is powerful enough to penetrate the target's armor. This is done in a very similar way. You have two basic statistics and a random seed that determines the outcome of whether you manage to penetrate. Each weapon will have its own weapon power, and each unit will have a certain level of armor. Basically, the more armor you've got, the less chance you'll get hit. The more weapon power you've got, the more chance you'll hit something. And of course, random seed, and you may or may not manage to penetrate the armor. If that is done, if you manage to get through that, you will then, the weapon power then represents the amount of hit points that unit will lose. Now, it might sound all a bit weird, but from my point of view, from what I see from programming the system, it's actually quite easy to calculate. I've actually got the statistics right in front of me of how everything is calculated. Now, obviously this is only the first part, this is the combat system. We hope to get that coded for an alpha test just to see if it balances out well when all our unit types are fully figured out. Now, I'm now going to attempt to explain how our unit types work. Give me a second, someone's just on TeamSpeak, so I'm just going to switch channel to AFK. There we go. Right. So we have varying unit types. We have ground units, we have flight units. Ground units are generally vehicles and soldiers on the ground. The soldiers on the ground will form part of squads. Basically have different levels. Each unit has a unit cost, and that unit cost is then associated to what it can be attached to, and basically decides how many units can fit inside a vehicle, how many vehicles can fit inside of a vehicle carrier, and so on and so forth. So, for instance, we have sergeants, pilots, just general soldiers, drivers, which are actually the same class of pilots. We're unsure yet whether we need the two separate classes. And colonels and captains. Colonels being the highest rank. Colonels actually manage to get their own regiment. And a colonel is considered the head of a regiment. A regiment contains smaller groups which are operated by captains, and those are, if I can remember the name, because I've got a mental block, those are troops. And then within the troops you have small squads. So the troops are headed by the captains, the squads are headed by the sergeants. So it's all pretty nice and simple. And that's how, but this is all sort of up in the air exactly how we're going to do this. So I'm actually talking to everyone very, very early in discussion. Now you can go on further from that if you wish. If you want to go on further, then you then go up to the vehicle classes and the ground vehicle classes. The ground vehicle classes consist of basic tanks, missile launchers, personnel carriers. Personnel carriers, for instance, have a maximum unit value of the amount of ground personnel they can carry. In general, we're trying to put it down to 2 squads or possibly 1 troop, and then they're all the way up to the central command centre, which can house 2 regiments and a number of vehicles.